and share your screen.
Sure, will do.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get going. So, good morning, and I welcome you all to our webcast, proudly sponsored and presented by BEST. The topic today is balance sheet reconciliations in SAP and successes achieved. Our speaker for this session is Chris Brooks, who is the GL Product Manager at BEST. Most of you are pros at this, but our usual housekeeping requests are to please keep your mics muted and your cameras off. We request that you utilize the chat line for all your questions, and they will be attended to at the end of the session. Once approved by the speaker, the presentation and recording will be shared with all hereafter and on our website. One final request from myself to each of you is to please take a few moments of your time at the end of the session to complete our feedback survey, as it benefits us greatly to hear from our community. I will share this link in the chat line shortly. I will now hand over the session to Chris, and I say enjoy, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So welcome and good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this morning's webinar. In this session, I'll be sharing with you our journey and customer success stories achieved through the implementation and use of our BEST GL Reconciliations module in SAP. So just to look at the agenda in terms of what we'll be covering in the session is just an introduction as to who exactly is BEST. I'll also talk you through why we have seen the need for a BEST GL Reconciliations module inside of SAP. And then I'd like to take you through some of our best customer success highlights. So looking at kind of the key benefits that they managed to achieve, some of the audit benefits achieved, as well as the controls that they were able to implement into their month-end reconciliation process. We also managed to achieve a number of different efficiencies, as well as some key reporting and oversight benefits that we managed to introduce. And then I'll take you through some of the processing highlights so that you can get an idea of the volumes and the number of percentage of automatic approvals being completed across different customers. Then also just, looking forward, BEST products are always evolving, just to give you some insight into that process, as well as looking at BEST and Fiori and how we're moving into that space to give you much more user interactive reports and tiles and dashboards that you can actually have a look at. And then finally, just looking at addressing any questions that you may pose in the chat. So as Tracy mentioned, if you're happy to just post all your questions in the chat, we should have plenty of time at the end of the session to come back and address those. Okay, so just looking at who is BEST and what are the modules that we have. BEST is a South African company, was founded in 2009, and our focus is really developing and implementing and supporting SAP certified modules. So we look at resolving gaps in the standard SAP functionality within the finance area. And because our BEST functionality is inside of SAP, that means that we don't have to interface or duplicate your data outside of the system, and we don't have to rely on any third-party infrastructure. We are an SAP partner, and our modules are all certified with SAP, and we are certified to S/4HANA 2022. So no matter where you are in your S/4HANA journey, the BEST modules are compatible. So just looking at this slide here, just to focus on that center graphic, we have the 4 key modules within BEST. The first one, the GL Reconciliations module, that's really the focus of my session today, to give you some feedback from our customer success stories, having implemented the Recon module, looking at automating your reconciliations as well as your entire approval process, all within SAP itself. We also have a GL Clearing module. This is primarily looking at managing open items in SAP. This can become quite a burdensome process within SAP, managing the clearing of open item balance sheets, customer and vendor accounts. And we find particularly where it becomes an issue is when you're looking at more complex clearing across company codes or across multiple different accounts, perhaps references on different reference fields. We can actually automate all of that type of clearing using some nice programmatic matching to help you reduce the time and effort spent in that space. Lastly, just looking at the two modules, these are more subledger relevant. We have the debtors remit and reader module. This is looking primarily at allocating customer payments to your customer account. So the scenario would be you get a lump sum payment and a 10, 15-page remittance advice, and now you have to use that to go and allocate this to your detailed customer account line items. And that can be quite time consuming. So what we can do is actually take that remittance and using OCR, read it, process it into SAP, and then use that, automatically clear your customer payment from your bank or customer account, and then use the clearing to manage the detailed remittance lines clearing to your detailed customer lines. And there can be a huge reduction in time and effort in that space, and we've seen some really nice high percentage matches in the upper 90s in terms of matching those remittance lines to the customer line items. Lastly, our vendor statement recon and reader module is now looking at your supplier or vendor accounts, where we can actually take your supplier statement and, again, using OCR technology, take that into SAP and match it to your vendor account. And now you can actually automatically produce a recon that you can send back to your supplier. And now you'll be able to identify the items that match automatically, or items that perhaps you haven't received an invoice that are still sitting in the GRR account, and it'll automatically categorize all of these items on your recon. Just the other thing is that obviously being inside of SAP, everything is real time. So we'll be accessing information from all the FI modules. So as you are processing within SAP, that's going to reflect in our BEST module. Okay, so just having a look at some of our BEST clients. This is just a graphic just to give you an idea of the different customers using BEST. And this is, some of them just, locally as well as abroad, but all benefiting from our BEST modules that they're using. And if you were ever keen to get in touch with any of our customers to understand more about their journey, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, there's also a lot of customer clients case studies that we have that's available on the website that you can have a look to understand more about their implementation and successes. So now just trying to understand why the need for BEST GL reconciliations. And we see that this is often a common problem when we go into initial discussions with prospects and understanding how they perform their current month-end reconciliations. And because SAP doesn't offer GL reconciliations as part of the standard, we find that it's all done outside of SAP. And the go-to kind of application is Microsoft Excel. It's always the popular finance application that gets used, and often the same process is adopted, where manual downloads are made from SAP, line item reports that are put into Excel, and that's where the reconciliation process starts. So there's perhaps manual categorization, balancing, notes that are made, and it's all done in Excel. And obviously this can be not only time consuming, but also error prone. There's no controls over what can be added, what can be changed, as well as it, becoming out of date as soon as, the transactional data in SAP changes. And now you have kind of an external extract that's out of sync. Typically, the supporting documentation is then either attached or put in as a screenshot. And then there's an off-system review, maybe a digital signature, sometimes even a physical signature. We've had customers that physically print the recons and sign them off, file them, and store them. And all of this is managed outside of your SAP security controls. So, other than some of the obvious limitations of this process, is that from a management perspective, it's very hard to introduce or be confident that there's a standard approach and consistency being applied throughout a process like this. And there's often a lack of visibility throughout this process. So very hard to determine where you are, how many are being completed, how many are left, who do I need to chase up to actually make sure that everything gets done. And it's very difficult to ensure that the controls that you're expecting is actually being enforced throughout your process. Okay, so I've mentioned, with BEST being inside of SAP, What that means is that you would have additional SAP transactions that you would be given, would be added to your SAP authorization profile, and then you would run these transactions within SAP. So from a user perspective, it really just feels like a natural extension of standard SAP. And because it's within SAP, it's very familiar and very easy to use. We don't need any interfaces to other systems. We're not trying to duplicate data outside of SAP. You're not having to log into a third-party system. And being in SAP, it's your same SAP security controls and audit trails. So underpinning our entire solution is the SAP authorizations, where you can limit based on company codes, transaction codes, etc., in terms of what access people have within BEST itself. It's also your same IT infrastructure. So your hardware, your SAP users, changes have to go through your standard SAP change process through transports, etc. And this is becoming more and more pertinent, as we look at data security and we look at protection of personal information. So all of this becomes quite important, that it's not, no information is now being taken outside of SAP. So as those backups are being done, BEST just becomes part and parcel of your SAP solution. I've already mentioned that everything is always current. So that means as you are running billing and clearing, that's going to automatically reflect on your reconciliation. And you can just rerun your reconciliation report to reflect that real life status. You don't have to go and update an Excel spreadsheet. It also means you can drill down. So you'll be able to actually drill into the document from your recon reports, and from there follow your normal SAP navigation. So go into the sales order, the purchase order, etc., and be able to see who posted it when, and actually just be able to move backwards and forwards within SAP seamlessly from your reconciliation reports and other BEST reports in SAP. All reconciliation activities are now integrated and automated in SAP, and the automation benefits of time saving and accuracy are achieved, and that I'll be talking to when we look at some of our customer successes in that space. So if reconciliations are being done manually or outside of SAP, that you can now fully automate them in BEST with higher visibility and controls, and it's also cost effective as it leverages your SAP investment and no need to purchase expensive third-party software. Okay, so I've spoken a lot about BEST being inside of SAP and the problems. So how do we achieve this? And just to give you some high-level overview of the BEST Recons solution in SAP is looking at this graphic where just moving through these key kind of 4 areas. The first point there is our reconciliation hub. Now, this is one of our key management reports. It's the culmination of all of your configuration, your master data, that basically tells you how many reconciliations you need to complete in the month. And you'll be able to see that the number of recons by company code, by who the responsible people are, and you'll most importantly be able to track that throughout your approval process. So at any point in time, you can see where those recons are sitting. So whether you have a 2, a 3, or 4 level approval, you'll be able to see how that's flowing through and be able to drive it through to completion all the way to your final level of approval. We can help you manage that with email notifications so that we can actually remind users that there's a pending approval, and then they can actually follow up on that to make sure that they get it completed. Yeah, it also serves as a master data report, so you have full visibility of the recons and the master data of what you are achieving within your system. Okay, so just moving on to the recon report itself. This is obviously an important component of it. This is where you actually can perform the reconciliation inside of SAP, and we can set what that level is. We can have multiple accounts combined into one. We can do it at a profit center or segment level. But essentially, it's going to pull all the information that you require, and it has a ton of information in this report. As an SAP user, I love it because it's combining customer, vendor, bank, fixed assets, header, line item information all in one, and I can pick and choose exactly what I want to see. All our reports are ALV reports, very easy to filter, to hide, to subtotal, and to show what information is pertinent for that specific recon. Aging comes standard for all of these recon reports. So at any point in time, you can actually look at now combining perhaps all your accrual accounts and look at how the items stack up from an aging perspective. We automatically categorize all of the items on the recon, and by that I mean we actually look at the inherent nature of the transaction and give you information back. Perhaps it was an accrual document that's still open, perhaps it exceeded a tolerance that has been flagged for you, perhaps it's been subsequently cleared after month end. All of that information is useful information and is reflected in our auto categorization. And lastly, on that recon report is that obviously we can add information into it. So we can have reason codes and long text and free text, and we have some custom fields where you, as a user or a preparer of the recon, or even an approver, can add notes to those line items. And these can be to show what actions you've done, or it could actually be to note an approval query that you've raised on the recon, and that has a full audit trail, so you can always see who changed it, who added it, or potentially who removed it, and those will remain on the recon for as long as those items are on the recon report itself. Okay, so just moving on to the recon approval. Again, this is obviously a critical control aspect of this entire process, and this is where we can inject controls into the process using system-driven control checks. So we can have warning and error messages that are managed per approval strategy and level, where we can actually have, to make sure that if you have an expectation of what needs to be done, that the system is managing that it is completed. And to give you some examples, that could be maybe it can't be approved while the period is still open. Maybe you always have to add a reconciliation status or a comparable balance or a bank statement balance, or add supporting documentation. All of that we can actually manage and make sure that it is completed at the time of approval. We can attach supporting documentation and store it inside of SAP. We can do that with external documents, PDF, Word, Excel, etc. We can also do that from reports run within SAP itself, which is really quite useful. You can go and print your MB5L reports to your spool and attach it directly to your stock recon, and it will attach it as supporting documentation. You don't have to print anything, you don't have to scan anything. It's all done within SAP itself and available to view at any time. Obviously, auto approvals is a big component of this. We can set up auto approval logic to actually work out maybe that there's no movement, the closing balance is zero, you can auto approve. But for different recons, you might have different criteria, and I'll discuss some of that when looking at potentially intercompany or investment accounts, where we can really benefit from this auto approval process. And lastly, just looking at the audit trail, that's where everything that happens from an approval point of view resides in the audit trail. So all the approvals, all the rejections, all the attachments is available there. You can see if it was done within the deadline, when it was done, who did it, etc. And the benefit of that is that obviously now you have full accountability. So at any point in time, you can actually see who has been managing that audit trail, and the audit trail really lends itself to brilliant exception reporting, because now you can, based on the information that you're pushing into your approvals, you can start using those metrics to really drive some nice exception reporting. So looking at was it done within the deadline? If I look at specific risk categories, can I see yellow and red status recons? Can I have a look at ones with material differences or specific balance differences? And that can be very useful information. And all of this from our hub and audit trail is what we're now pushing into nice reporting dashboards within Fiori itself. Okay, so hopefully that just gives you a little bit of background if you had never heard of BEST or some of our modules, and or essentially what we're going to be talking about, in terms of the functionality that our customers have implemented. Before I move on to actually just giving you some of the success highlights achieved across the different different customers. And I think, you know, we've had different sessions before with specific customers, but this is quite nice to actually look across the board and actually really mine all of the successes achieved across those categories that I've got listed there that I will now talk through with you. Okay, so now just looking at key benefits achieved. In this case, I'm going to, identify a problem. The problem was that there were a lot of manual reconciliation activities, and the key benefits that we had noted, feedback from our customers, eliminated the printing of reconciliations, eliminated the manual signing of reconciliations, and eliminated loan account confirmations via email. And how we achieved that was looking at, with this online reconciliation and a PDF output functionality, we could actually do away with the need to print these reconciliations. So now everything's available online in SAP. I hadn't really mentioned that PDF output. That's effectively a way of being able to print a kind of nice formal view of the reconciliation. It has a summary sheet, it has a detailed sheet. We can put detail in Excel, and we can also include all the supporting documentation that was attached at the time of approval. And that can be printed and that can be emailed, and that can be very useful for distributing to perhaps non-SAP users that are third-party stakeholders. The online approval functionality obviously means that we could drop the manual signing of recons. Now everything's done online. It has a full digital audit trail, and everything's managed through SAP authorizations underpinning that process. And lastly, that this intercompany matrix functionality is really useful for managing your loan accounts. And essentially, we can run automatic approval off that. So what we've seen is very successful. One of our customers set up the intercompany matrix with all their intercompany combinations, and that really means you can maybe say this GL offsets with this GL, and that's in its simplest form. But we can break that down to customers and vendors, trading partners and segments, and any blend of one to many or many to many, etc., that make up that specific relationship for that intercompany relationship. And we can then report on that. We can actually run it as a normal recon and approve it. And what we found is this customer actually ran auto approval for any of those relationships that offset to zero. So now they could create hundreds of these relationships, run auto approval, and manage all the ones that didn't agree to zero at the end of the day. And just a note, from AfriSam, the paperless solution results in printing, paper costs, and storage fees savings. So they were actually, printing, signing, and storing all reconciliations at month end, which they could do away with after having implemented BEST. Another problem around time-consuming, inefficient process. The benefits that we had noted that we could achieve was an increased volume of reconciliations per month. So actually being able to do more with the same staff complement, and also be able to complete it faster. And that's also due to automated processes and approvals. And how we achieve that, again, with that online reconciliation report, managing our automatic approvals, and then using our management reporting to actually manage the completion of month-end recons. So we can actually see what's outstanding, chase those people up, and make sure that you get 100% completeness throughout your process. I think it was Bacardi that had noted after implementing BEST, they had a 40% increase in the volume of reconciliations that they could do. They would often look at a very much a risk-based approach because they couldn't cover everything. So they had a whole process to identify their scope for the month. After implementing BEST, they could reconcile all their balance sheet recons, and that represented a 40% increase, which was obviously a huge saving for them. Just continuing with those key benefits achieved, a problem noted lack of standardization and controls. So the benefits achieved was that standardization was introduced across all reconciliations performed in BEST, and those system-driven controls were introduced throughout the process, and that gave a base level of control within the process. And how we achieve this is, we have reconciliation templates that we can create that are assigned per recon type, so we can actually start creating a common view across the business for specific recons. And now all of a sudden accrual now becomes common, where everyone is now looking at the recon and preparing it in the same way. And to create those system-driven controls, we can introduce that into the approval process. And I'd mentioned some of these, but we can have those control checks on adding a recon status or a posting period check, whether you need a reason code or a long text, whether you need an attachment for your supporting documentation, or any additional balances for a comparable balance like a subledger, or perhaps a bank statement balance where applicable. And all of those can be managed with warnings or error messages as you require. Okay, looking at another problem was the recons and supporting documentations not easy to locate. And that was often where perhaps it's on a shared drive or it's on SharePoint, and now you're trying to find a recon, and you're trying to find the supporting documentation, and it can all be quite confusing if people are, saving things in different folders. But the key benefits achieved was that now all your historic reconciliations are available in SAP. So at the time of completing your approval, we can take a snapshot, and you have a historic snapshot that's available within SAP at all times. So now you don't have to go hunting for anything. Everything that you need is available in SAP, and that's also useful not only from just a file location, but also just from not having to be in the office, and you can actually locate and view these recons from wherever you are in the world. All supporting documentation per recon available online in SAP. I'd mentioned our attachments, and now you can view all of that, and you're able to print and email historic recons directly from SAP, and that we can do via that PDF functionality, and you can automate that if needs be, if it's like a specific set of recipients that require specific recons every month. And just quickly, how we achieved all of those benefits was, again, our online reconciliation report. You can view current as well as finalized recons, all those attachments stored in SAP and available online. And those attachments can be made directly from SAP via the SAP spool, which I mentioned, for like a MB5L or fixed asset register. Our management reporting in SAP, with those real-time approval statuses being updated, you can now make sure that you can manage that whole process to completion, and the PDF output allows you to be able to print and view those recons online. Okay, now just looking lastly, key benefits. The last key benefit, just a customer requirement was, they had certain processes that weren't covered by the standard solution. So they had a custom requirement, and we have the facility to be able to cater for those, looking at user exits that we can then manage these specific requirements. And this was, we did some for Bacardi, which was a huge help for them. We were able to create a US dollar group currency value in their recon report, which they didn't actually have available in standard SAP. So that was a huge thing for them, and a few other things that were specific to their process. And their take on it, or feedback, was without these enhancements, Bacardi would have had to implement manual workaround processes. These enhancements save Bacardi considerable time and greatly simplify our reporting. These enhancements also ensured the following two benefits: best solution aligned to the existing Bacardi reconciliation policy, thereby ensuring it need not be changed, and users were easily able to align with and to adopt the best solution as a result of it including these familiar Bacardi requirements. Okay, moving on. Just looking at, so those were some of the key benefits achieved. Now just looking more at an audit specific angle, is that a benefit: reduced effort spent on audit queries was noted. And this we have noted across the multiple customers, because they can actually provide auditor access to BEST and SAP to allow them to find and review reconciliations as they require. But if you don't really want to give auditors display access in SAP, you can use the PDF output to email reconciliations as a supporting document to auditors. So you can actually now reduce the amount of time that you're having to spend to actually give them the information. And from a comment from Italtal's internal audit, verify and submit the audit trail report to our auditor and risk committee, as a balance sheet recon and a bank recon is critical in our organization. Another, just a audit benefit, enhanced auditor confidence in the balance sheet reconciliation process. So through the completeness of the reconciliation process, approvals can be monitored to ensure the approval has been completed and within the required deadline. And with the inherent controls introduced into the process, it gives the auditors a little bit more confidence in the month-end reconciliation process that's being used. And it's fully auditable with the full audit trail available in SAP. So a comment from Discam, automation and online functionality in SAP with Best GL Recons has led to better internal controls, enhancing regulatory compliance. Yeah, so just to cover, some of the key controls that we were able to implement across our customer implementations, and note some of the key ones that were noted throughout our customer clients' case studies. The controls around automated process to reduce manual errors, the full audit history and change reporting that's available, automated control checks to ensure compliance at the time of those approvals, those automated controls that we can implement, management oversight through comprehensive management and exception reporting, and assisting with compliance of new SOX controls, such as ensuring that master data is correct and accurate in SAP, and ensuring that the correct owners of the accounts are assigned in the master data. So now having all of that within the system and within part of our best master data, you can actually report on that and manage it and actually see who are the people that are approving this, are they the correct people, and you can actually ensure that that is constantly reviewed and updated to be in line with your SOX expectations. Just a client comment here from Netcare, the implementation of several controls throughout the month-end process of particular importance to Netcare being a listed entity, namely automated control checks to ensure users comply with specific requirements, and value checks and validations inherent in the approval process. Okay, just looking at efficiencies achieved. Paperless solution, printing, paper cost and storage fees saving, time saving and optimized staff allocation. That's something that's worth noting. In terms of being able to save time on those manual processes, you can actually now optimize with that available time, what your staff are actually looking at. And instead of now just managing a lot of manual processes, actually looking at problem items on the reconciliations itself. Recons available for review immediately when prepared, no delays waiting for files or spreadsheets. Reconciliations are updated real-time in SAP, so there's no need to reprint or re-sign all the documents again, and simplified intercompany loan reconciliations and confirmations. Just a client comment there from Italtal. Our due date for the balance sheet recons is the 10th, and the bank recons are the 7th. We now get bank recons completed as early as the 3rd day now, and balance sheet recons on the 5th. This is because on Best, it's such an easy process. There's no manual processes. It's all online. And so through those efficiencies, people are able to do things, to able to complete more reconciliations, as well as complete them quicker, which allows for more time to focus on the actual items on the recons. Okay, now before I move on to the processing stats, the last kind of benefits is just looking at reporting and oversight benefits, improved reporting and management of month-end processes. Recon Hub provides easy oversight of the month-end recon statuses and progress, and the full audit history reporting ensures full accountability, and peer reviews can now be easily performed. So I've mentioned the Recon Hub and the audit trail, and all of that's feeding into these reporting and oversight benefits. And just some feedback from Bacardi and Italtal. So Bacardi had noted that the best management reporting is assisting Bacardi to manage their approval status and their reconciliation deadlines. These reports have provided Bacardi with real-time and reliable reporting previously not available before. Best management reports have replaced the legacy SharePoint spreadsheet that was updated manually and which was never entirely accurate or fully reliable. And From Italtile, the most important management report for me is the audit trail, as it gives me everything I need and cannot be manually manipulated. I run this on a user basis so I can understand how many recons the accountants are doing on a monthly basis, along with completion times and supporting attachments. Okay, which gets me to the end of our processes from a oversight. I just get you pretty close to the end now. Just going to give you some highlights of some processing statistics, and this can be quite useful, looking back, as we often do client health checks to check in with how they're using the system, where we can improve usage, but actually have a look at what's being done. And just looking at some of these here, I'll give you some feedback. So looking at the first client, the AFSUG, they've been using our GL Recons since 2021, and they're actually completing over 16,000 recons per month. Now, that's a very high number, and the reason for that is that on a lot of those accounts, they actually reconcile it at a profit center level, which obviously creates that high level of reconciliations, but they use the auto approval to manage that. So for any profit center that's not being posted to, will be automatically approved. So they have a very high auto approval percentage because it's all of those profit centers that aren't being used are automatically approved, and then they manage the recons for the specific profit centers with balances. And they're also completing all their recons and approving them within their set deadline within the system, which is quite impressive. Looking at Bacardi, they've also been using it since 2021. They complete just over 4,500 recons per month. Their auto approval percentage is just over 10% that they are automatically approving every month, and they are effectively now completing 100% of their balance sheet recons now within Best. And I'd mentioned that before, where they had gone from a risk-based approach to now actually being able to complete 100% of their balance sheets, which was a huge win for them. Netcare, using our GL Recons since 2021, may complete over 20,000 recons per month, which is a staggeringly high number, considering that those 20,000 are being approved, twice within the system. They approve 66% of those month-end recons, and that's how they're able to achieve such a high number. I think Netcare's objective is always to reconcile all balance sheet accounts, and that's why they have such a high month-end number. And they are completing 92% of those within their set deadline. And what I thought was worth noting is that they're completing about 300 ad hoc approvals per month. Now, I hadn't mentioned ad hoc approvals, but this is an approval that you can do within the system that sits outside of your formal approval process. And it's very useful to be able to keep track of this if perhaps maybe it's a control check that needs to be done. It could be a financial director that wants to do it. It could be internal audit. And they could actually go in and at any point in time, spot check a recon, check that the attachment's being done, and then they could actually do this ad hoc approval, and you have full visibility that was done. So they're in Netcare, obviously, using that ad hoc approval very well within their system. Dischem have been using our recons since 2020. They complete over 2,400 recons per month and are automatically approving about 14% of their month-end recons. Italtile, also 2021, completing approximately 150 recons per month. They have a very focused set of recons that they look at, and are automatically approving 37% of those every single month. And lastly, ShopRite, since 2022, they're completing about 550 recons per month and are automatically approving 43% of those month-end reconciliations. So those are some of our customers in terms of looking at recent stats that they are, and it's useful to sometimes have just understand the volumes and the percentages of how important that automatic approval can be. Okay, so just looking forward, the best modules are constantly evolving. So we are constantly adding new enhancements and new functionality that we are building into the standard product. And these are always available to our customers via a support pack. So at any point in time, any of our customers can upgrade to the latest support pack. A new support pack is released at a minimum of every 6 months. More often it's probably 2 to 3 months, but at a minimum every 6 months. And that new functionality we notify our customers about. We have release notes, and based on the new enhancements, someone might decide to upgrade and have access to that new functionality. So it's always constantly evolving and building. Just to give you an idea of some of the latest enhancements, we have included automated emailing functionality via the Recon Hub. And this provides those approval notifications and escalations. And why this is worth noting is that it's not normal workflow. It's not that every approval gets done, you get an email. With the volumes of recons that are being done and with automated approvals, the last thing you need to do is get 150 emails every day notifying you of an approval that's pending. And we just found that that's not a very practical solution. People just start ignoring those emails. You create a rule, move it to a folder, and you never see it again. So what happens is we can batch this via the Recon Hub. Typically, if you think of it, we'd maybe run it once every day, and you would get one email for the day notifying you of all the approvals that have been done. And you have a little attachment you can click on. It logs you into SAP. It pre-populates the approval program for all of those approvals. You can run it and then start with your approvals. So it seemed like a very practical application of the requirement without kind of bombarding you with a million emails a day. Also included additional account balances that are available in the Recon Hub and approval programs. And essentially what this is it gives you a whole lot of balance information, the current Recon balance, the movement, the percentage, prior year, year-end balance, the prior year Recon balance and movements and percentages, etc. So that's just quite useful information to have, particularly from the Recon Hub, that might help drive what you want to focus on. Large movements, large balances might have inherent risk that you might then want to focus on, as well as, from the approval program, it can help just, drive the kind of mindset and focus that you're looking at when approving that recon, to take in consideration perhaps these balances and movements. And then lastly, just looking, at S/4HANA Fiori tiles and dashboards, which I'll actually give you some detail on now. So as people are moving to S/4HANA, Fiori is becoming more and more of a requirement and more of a almost a default user platform for using SAP and not via the GUI. We can actually make the Best GL main menu available within Fiori, so that you can actually click on the tile and have access to all of the best functionality within Fiori itself. And over and above that, we're creating these GL Fiori dashboards, where at any point in time you can actually see key reports and information represented quite nicely graphically like this, and you can actually click on different segments within the charts to drill down into the information. And it's quite a nice way of representing this data differently to perhaps the the standard ALV type reporting that we're used to. So just to mention some of these, looking at it here, is that this could be your approvals. So now you can actually have a look at how many are actually approved and not approved, and to level 1, giving you an idea of where you are in your month end. We can also look at reports like having a look at your finalized recons, so all of your completed recons by a specific status. So you could actually have a look and see which maybe are approved with no differences, small differences, large differences, etc., and drill down into the detail directly from your Fiori report. And then lastly, just 2 other reports, looking at perhaps balances. So you can actually have a look at, for the recons that you're performing in the month, what are the balances per account group. We can look at your current year and prior year, so that you can kind of get a good idea of comparable balance to the prior year. And And then also top 10 value movements. So based on your selection, you can actually see what your top 10 value movements are for those recons. And that might also just help to highlight something that you might want to focus on or have a look at and check how that was done. So much more user interactive, graphical kind of display of best information in Fiori, which is quite nice. And that is the end of my presentation. So hopefully kind of within enough time to cover any questions that hopefully you've been posting. We will be sharing this presentation with you. It's got all my contact information there. So please feel free to if you'd rather raise any questions with me directly offline, feel free to email me, call me, and we can chat. And it's got obviously our website information there. And I'll put in a QR code, which I think if you scan, we'll put all my contact details in your phone if that's a bit easier. So hopefully that all works correctly. But that is essentially it from a presentation perspective. So I will stop sharing and then we can perhaps field some questions for the last 15 minutes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. There are a couple of questions in the chat line. Would you like to, can you see them yourself, or do you want me to read them, or would you like them to unmute themselves? It's up to you.
I don't mind. Let me just see. I'm just going to pull up the chat. Catching up. So, okay, just looking at the first one, I'm just looking at, we have SAP and SysPro in our environment, can best be deployed in SysPro or non-SAP systems. So, no, it's just SAP. Our products are specifically for SAP installations, unfortunately. Yes, is best supported on a CFIN environment. Yes, it is. And we could look at looking at the central finance, pulling information from that system and running reports for a CFIN environment for sure. Just feel free to shout if there's any follow-up if I'm not answering these entirely to your satisfaction. Just going to keep moving on. Does GL Recon on SAP offer similar online storage capacity? And if not, how does SAP allocate online storage to its customers? So effectively what we do from a attachment perspective is look at typically using what you might already have in place from a data management system. So a common one might be Archive Link, where you have a dedicated repository that you would store these documents in, and we find, I think that's perhaps the most cost effective, and it's also very useful for managing storage. It's very easy to identify where storage might be needed to be added, and very easy to add to that so that you can manage that process. And we just would tap into a specific content repository that you would create in SAP where we could save our attachments, but we also have other mechanisms that we can tap into, like Gosh, other solutions where people have perhaps used SharePoint. But at worst, there's always that application server, but we tend to not obviously use that for obvious reasons of just storing information on your SAP application server. But any of those options would be available. So hopefully that, Chris, if that answers your question. Henrik, thanks very much for your comment. I have experience with Best AP Recon process going back to 2014, all positive. Okay, great, thank you. How is foreign currencies handled for SA? So Magda, if we track all 4 currencies within SAP. So on our Recon, you'll be able to view the balances for your documents in local currency. And if you are using local currency 2 and local currency 3, you will have those available. So typically local currency 2 might be a group currency, for instance, and local currency if you use local currency 3, maybe it's a hard currency or an index-based currency, you'll have all of those values. So at any point in time, you might be able to see all the document currency is your local currency, and then ideally like a group currency and local currency too. And within your best GL master data, you can actually set what you would like the recon currency to be. Where that's quite useful is for the likes of intercompany, for instance, where it might be across different company codes that are all using different local currencies. And now to start looking at balances that are offsetting, it becomes a bit meaningless. So if you have a common currency of like, let's say US dollars for group currency, you could set that as your recon currency. And now you actually, it sets that as the value that you're checking, and you can run auto approvals on that. And if everything is in US dollars, it'll auto approve, for instance. So you can manage that within our best master data. Okay, Best is activated as an add-on to your transactional system and bring new roles, transaction codes with standard reports and possibility to add custom reports or manageable via GRC. Yes. So what we do is effectively when we provide our system PAT files, we have standard transports with our roles in it, and from there you can actually allocate and incorporate those roles into your own business roles, and then could manage with via GRC how those roles are then applied to your different staff members, and that would be seamless effectively within GRC itself. Okay, and yes, we will submit I'm just look at the last comment. Yeah, send the presentation to everyone, and yeah, so you can kind of work through everything that I've gone through. But again, if there's anything that you feel maybe I haven't addressed correctly, we still got some time. If you want to ask me, feel free to ask me a question, or otherwise just reach out and get in touch with me on email. Give me a call. Was there anything? Just shout if there's anything that I haven't answered correctly on these questions. Otherwise, also feel free to contact me. But
I saw a few thumbs up there, Chris. So hopefully people are happy.
Okay, cool. I'll take it then.
I was just going to encourage if everyone is still online, send a thumbs up so we can see if you appreciated the presentation from Chris. Because we are very, very grateful, Chris, from our side, obviously from AFSUG and from our community. We thank BEST for hosting and sponsoring this event. Extremely informative. We had a number of people online. We did not have drop-offs, so you kept them, wouldn't say entertained, but you kept them part of the community enjoying your session this morning. I think we have 5 minutes. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? Do you want 5 minutes back to go soak up some sun? I'm going to say yes, no, yes. I think we can close the session. Thank you so much, Chris, on behalf of AFSUG and BEST.
Gerda had a hand up there for a second. Don't know if she wants to ask.
Good morning. We work on the BEST vendor recons. Have to do with that, not the GL. But just a question. You were saying that you can actually print the historic GL recons. Now, on our vendor recons, they update live. Like you said, if there's a new transaction, it updates. So is there on the GL recons also a functionality where you can actually set the recon to stop? Because when the auditors come, they actually want, let's say, a recon for end of March, for instance. They don't want the live one.
Yes. So and if I'm not mistaken, it should be the same on the AP side. Effectively, what happens is when that approval process is completed, there's a finalization that we do, and that stores the historic snapshot. So if we were looking back at, like you say, running a March recon, we would have an option to run a current or the final recon. Now, the final will be the historic snapshot, and the current would be, just executing it on the system as it is now. So I'm pretty sure that on AP, if there's a final selection, it should actually then pick up that finalized snapshot. So, you know, if the example was you finalized it with a balance of 100,000, and for whatever reason someone then posted some transactions, you know, when you run the current, it would reflect that new balance, whereas your snapshot would always stay the same. And from a GL perspective, we can manage that through two ways. We could obviously have that posting period check. So, you know, if you don't allow finalization until the period is closed, that minimizes that risk of that happening, because someone would actually have to kind of open the period post after you had finalized. But we also have an auto rejection where we actually can run an automated job. It compares the current balance to the finalized balance, and if there's any movement, can auto reject that recon so that it goes through the approval process, so that your historic snapshot is always accurate for that finalized balance. But AP, I'm sure, has that final view. I'll just follow up on that and get back to you, just so that I'm not giving you false information.
No, that's fine. Thank you. You answered my question. We have a request in at Best at the moment to do that settings for us. Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Anyone else? Does anyone have a raised hand? I don't see anyone. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you once again, Best.
Yeah.
I am going to stop the recording and stop sharing with